the active management industry is effectively in a state of crisis.
22% of active managers this year to date through the third quarter, have outperformed their benchmark.
If that holds for the end of the year, that will be the lowest percentage of outperforming active managers in at least 2 decades. I want to note a couple of things here. Active management is a mathematically challenged competition in that you have a pool of active investors that are charging high fees to effectively price securities efficiently. And next to them, you have passive investors who charge much lower fees. And so the active investors get the returns of the market, less the higher fees, while the passive investors get the return of the market, less the lower fees. So in the aggregate, active management will continue to underperform passive management. Why do we do it? Well, because some active managers are able to outperform over the long term, albeit with some volatility relative to their benchmark. I think that there's really two ways that this competition manifests itself in active managers' behavior that is not conducive to active managers outperforming in the long run, and it all comes down to herding. So there's two ways you see this herding behavior. One is in risk limits. Risk limits prevent the extent to which managers can invest on an active basis outside of the benchmark. So a lot of institutional investors will take their active managers, so you can only invest so much in tech, you can only invest so much in these names. And so the more constraints you put on an optimization problem, the less likely you are to get to an optimal result. And, but it depends on how you define optimization. A lot of these managers are prioritizing near-term business needs. They don't want to see redemptions. They don't want to see people fall too far behind the benchmark. But the more of those active risk limits you put on, the less likely it is in the long term that your manager will outperform. So to actually outperform, you have to take risks that are well outside of the benchmark. You have to be willing to tolerate results that are well outside of the benchmark, potentially for extended periods of time. The other way, and so one other interesting stat on that is that the other way you see this behavior show up among active managers is in chasing what's been hot. And one of our research providers, empirical research, noted that the returns to momentum strategies over the past 6 months have been greater at any time than in 7 decades. Okay, so what does that mean? This is not a great environment for concentrated value disciples. I struggle I'm concerned about the eventual offset for these momentum investors, but that's reality. And so you think about, okay, what's been hot this year? Well, it's AI, which is something we've shied away from historically. Astute value investors with insight should have been overweighting AI 4 or 5 years ago. Okay, before the world-changing potential was broadly recognized in valuations in the marketplace. So from our perspective, there is no doubt that AI will continue to reshape the world in the same ways that railroads, telephones, airplanes, and the internet did. But if you look back at the history of those innovations, all experienced speculative investment bubbles, collapses, and eventual consolidations. And indeed, all of these investment frenzies are actually what enabled the insane amount of innovation, right? Because you have tons of capital, tons of energy going into it. It's just very hard to pick the winners when everyone's getting incredibly excited about the long-term potential. And so one of the most interesting things I saw this quarter, which I mentioned in the letter, is there was a recently released study by Bain, the consulting firm, which actually quantified the amount of revenue and demand that would be required to justify the extent of investment we're seeing today. And Bain found that the ongoing revenues that would be needed to justify today's CapEx investment, the project, what's been going on from an AI investment perspective, they need to reach 2 trillion annually by 2030. Okay, let's put 2 trillion annually in AI revenues into context. 2 trillion in revenues for AI is more than the combined annual revenue today of Microsoft, Alphabet, Nvidia, Meta, Apple, and Amazon. All right. It's also, as the Wall Street Journal noted, more than 5 times the size of the entire global subscription software market today. So, we think there is a reckoning coming here. While we've seen extensive competition among active management of late and things aren't going great for active as a whole, all is not lost. And no, you shouldn't put all your money in passive funds. Reason being that some active managers with differentiated strategies will actively outperform their benchmark over extended periods of time, albeit with some volatility. I'd encourage you to take a look on our website at a piece I wrote 8 years ago called Why Do We Invest with Active Managers Again? And it gives you a checklist for how to think about active management, how to evaluate it, who to invest with, and why we still invest in them. The basic point here is that if past is prologue, why don't you find an active manager that has outperformed their benchmarks over long periods of time, has a differentiated strategy, and invest with them instead of investing with passive just because that's been what's hot.